Irish missionaries have put the radical ideals of liberation into practice in many different ways. For Dubliner, Father Shay Cullen, it has led him on a 40-year-long campaign against child abuse in the Philippines. Cullen has been nominated on 3 separate occasions for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Saving souls doesn't come into the equation, doesn't come into our thinking whatsoever. We're gone beyond all that. So that's a very old theology that's quite irrelevant nowadays.
Shay Cullen is on his way to a prison in Manila with a team from his PREDA Foundation. After years of campaigning, Shay succeeded in changing Filipino law, making it illegal for children to be imprisoned with adults. Despite the law, the practice continues.
They tell of all sorts of beatings, abuse inside, you know. They are subjected to a lot of physical abuse and even some sexual abuse for the younger kids. There you go. They've been treated as nothing, throwaway children, and we want them to know that they're loved and important and precious, and so we have to affirm and support them in every possible way. We've created a sanctuary, you know, here at the PREDA Center, a home for them, and then developed a program which is non-punitive. They stay here willingly and freely, and they go through a life transformation. Jesus himself, the Sermon on the Mount, is very, blessed are the poor, theirs is the kingdom. And those who hunger and thirst for justice shall have their fill. These are the parts of Scripture that really inspire many of the missionaries throughout history and even ourselves today. It's an amazing revolutionary message.
Shay Cullen was ordained to the Columban Missionary Society in 1969 and posted immediately to the Philippines.
When I joined the Columban Missionary Society, my idea was that I would spend my life doing something, you know, maybe worthwhile and meaningful for other people. That simple idea. So I started a mission here in Olongapo City, assigned to the local parish.
There are an estimated 16,000 prostitutes in Olongapo. They've come here from poorer parts of the Philippines, answering advertisements for waitresses or hostesses. The path to prostitution is rapid. They are in continual debt to the club owners, so escape is impossible.
I was on the street one day, and, you know, they mistook me as a tourist, and they offered me children and said, "You want to take these, Joe, do what you like, you know, it'll cost you $100. You know, I was shocked. That was my first experience of this street scene, and developed my own suddenly growing awareness of what's going on here, that children are sold as sex slaves right here on the streets of the city where we're supposed to be evangelizing. So I had to confront that situation.
To achieve his aim, Shay would have to take on the authorities who licensed the brothels, the pimps who ran them, and the principal client base, America's 7th Navy Fleet.
There are 37,000 Filipinos employed on the base at Subic Bay, and every evening, as they return home across the main bridge linking the base with the city of Olongapo, their numbers are swollen by thousands of sailors on shore leave. They are headed for the bars and nightclubs which crowd the streets of Olongapo and have earned it the title of the biggest brothel in the world.
With the local community, Shay began demanding that the American Navy withdraw from the Philippines. They let the world's media know that children were being sold as sex slaves in the brothels. Cullen and his fellow campaigners were subjected to constant harassment and intimidation. 2 were murdered.
When you speak the gospel, or when you're preaching these values and demanding human rights and justice, the powerful authorities, they want to silence one. They want you to shut up and stop it. So we must remember that if you do confront authority and point out the evils of oppressors and tyrants, there will be retaliation. I know that because I was arrested and beaten up myself by police.
He's risking a lot. He knows he could be thrown out of the country at any moment. He knows, you know, he could be taken out by the gangs that profiteer from child prostitution and so forth. But the man's conviction is such, like many before him, that he's prepared to do that.
You have to remember, I mean, this is what Jesus did, and he spoke out forcibly. I mean, he's calling these authorities white as sepulchres and vipers and all sorts of, you know, names. So he didn't last more than 3 years. And he got the death penalty.
After a decade of unrelenting pressure, the American Navy pulled out in 1992. But sex tourism had become an integral part of the local economy, and the industry is still thriving today. Shea continues his crusade against underage prostitution. The PREDA team travels the streets at night. When they find girls younger than 16, they offer them refuge at the foundation.
We're not going to try and save the whole population of 60,000 children who are trafficked and exploited in the sex industry. We know that. All we can do is to save as many lives as we can, to keep alive the message of human dignity and rights of women and children not to be exploited, abused, and sexually enslaved.
The work of Irish missionaries like Shea Cullen is overshadowed by the revelations of the abuse of children by clergy.
It was here in the environs of the Archbishop's house in Dublin that much of the cover-up took place. Today,
Nothing like the research that took place in Ireland has been done in missionary countries. But what is known is that some Irish priests did abuse children on the missions, and that church authorities conspired to cover it up. The Columban priest Patrick Maguire abused children in Japan during the 70s. The Columbans brought him home, but then, with some collusion by the Archdiocese, moved him around Ireland and England for 2 decades, during which he abused over 70 children. He was finally convicted in 1997. Clerical child abuse scandals have undermined the work of men like Shea Cullen, who have spent their lives fighting child abuse.
What happened to these children is something evil condemned by Jesus way 2,000 years ago. Jesus is pretty tough on this. I mean, he's not talking here to forgive the abuser and all of this stuff. It's better a millstone be tied around his neck, a large one, and he drowned in the sea. And not only that, but he says how terrible it is for those who cause it to happen, who allow it to happen. So I hold everyone responsible who could have prevented it, who could have stopped it. They all have to be challenged. These are the kind of messages we have to focus on: the dignity of the individual, the rights of every person, the rights of women, children to be protected. I just, you know, I really find this, you know, today's world and the way the churches gets in a terrible mess in unable to deal with such a basic reality of human life. And they can't cope with this. It's, you know, it's a very serious problem. When it's so simple and basic, you just don't do this. You just don't tolerate this. We just don't cover it up. Institutionalized Catholicism, particularly, has a lot to answer for and a lot to review and a lot to look into itself for its own spiritual renewal. People will lose their faith over these things. You know, saving souls doesn't come into the equation, doesn't come into our thinking whatsoever. We're gone beyond all that. So that's a very old theology that's quite irrelevant nowadays. We're about transforming society and trying to create some kingdom of justice and peace here on this earth.
And the concluding part of that documentary can be seen next week at the same time. Coming up next tonight, however, the latest in art, cinema and opera are discussed on The View. running riot over on RT2 at the moment. It's the Twisted Twins, Podge and Rog.